Some of the latest news and notes around the NFL. Jonathan Taylor potentially has a landing spot as rumored. Chris Jones, Nick Bosa, holdouts continue. Will they go into the regular season? And QB strength of schedule around the NFL. Coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. We appreciate you. Subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, we went through the entire list yesterday, Matt, of potential suitors for Jonathan Taylor, even if it was possible that he could get traded, if this was posturing by the Indianapolis Colts and there's no way he gets traded. But it sounds like the rumor mill is churning a little bit, and we might have a team that is the leader in the clubhouse right now to trade for Jonathan Taylor.
And it's a team we brought up. It's a team Ryan and I brought up on Locked On Dynasty. And again, this is rumors. But it does make some sense to me. And that's the Miami Dolphins. I just did a quick scan on their salary cap situation. As it stands right now, late August, they have $13 million to spend. So that's in the top third or so. One of the best thirds. But next year, they're $32 million in the hole. So, and that's without Tua signed. That's without a quarterback big contract. So I do think they're in it to win it this year. That offense with him, though, would be pretty frightening. I think it's a good fit.
I love the fit. I love the fit. It would be the most obvious where he's like, okay, this is a committee right now, but let's drop in a star running back that can actually make a difference for your football team and then figure out the rest later. A new Tua deal, a new Jonathan Taylor deal could potentially drop the cap numbers in the first year of those contracts. So some of it should be doable, and then they have to figure out some things later and push that down the road into 2025, with some of their bigger contracts and figure those out. But a totally doable deal. So I agree. I think right now the Miami Dolphins does make the most sense, probably with everything included, whether you believe the rumor source or not.
Yeah, and I don't know their contract situation well enough, but there's, like every team, there's probably a handful of guys they can cut after the season and then free up some space going forward. Maybe a rework Tyreek's deal or something like that too.
The automatic ones that come to mind is Tyreek and Jalen Ramsey. And, restructure, release, whatever it is. There's space to be made there for sure.
And you can do it next off season. You can get Taylor in basically now, make everybody happy, maybe win the Super Bowl. Who knows? So real quick, if that were to happen, fantasy stock up or down? I got to say up. Much better offense. No vulturing of quarterback, touchdowns.
I want a running back as talented as Jonathan Taylor on an offense where teams can't stack the box against you with an offensive mind that was the run game coordinator in a Shanahan offense, right? Like that's the perfect combination of big time value for your running back. Maybe even a few more receptions in there possibly.
So when he was hired as the Dolphins head coach, on many platforms, I said, I don't care who it is. I want his running back early in fantasy. Well, it ended up being 5 guys and I don't want any of them. But if it were a dude, I want him bad. And I bet he does too. You know what I mean? Like he can't be happy with that run game with his background.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly. So, and the willingness is there from ownership, management on down. We've seen the way they've worked there so far. So that's an interesting one to keep an eye on. I don't know if it still makes a ton of sense. I think the running game will be fine either way. So is it necessary to go through all the hoops? But we'll see. Jonathan Taylor, Miami, something to watch out for. All How worried? What's the worry meter right now for the Chris Jones and Nick Bosa holdouts for you, Matt? Because everything coming out of San Francisco and Santa Clara, more accurately, in the Bay Area here, Nick Bosa holdout is like it's getting to the nitty gritty, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of worry. There's no reports. There's no leaks from agents or teams that anything bad is happening. It's just a really tough negotiation. Maybe they're hoping the Chris Jones deal happens first and it makes something easier that they're trying to figure out. We've seen the Bosas. The family's been in football. They will play hardball. We've seen it with Joey Bosa before with the Chargers, right? So they're not going to be deja vu or anything. So who knows what the negotiating points are right now. But Bosa getting in next week is fine. But you start to miss games, and that's where things get a little worrisome. So from locally, I don't feel any worry at all about the Nick Bosa holdout, but it sounds like things are not quite as smooth with the Chris Jones negotiations in Kansas City.
Yeah, cool. Because I did want to get your take on Bosa. We have not talked about either one of these nearly enough, and they're quite possibly the two best defensive players on the planet right now. You know, I mean, so there was a headline today about Chris Jones. Highly questionable for week 1, strongly considering sitting out till week 8, you know, because then he can come in and get his year. But that seems very agent driven to me too. That's a lot of payday.
And that's what I'm talking about. There haven't been those leaks with the Bosa camp. In fact, Bosa was in New York. His social media account was like, you know, hey, I'm in New York City. And everyone's like, oh, that's where his agent is. They're figuring out the end of the contract and it'll get done. We'll see if that actually happens. But that's where, and I think the teams right now are probably like, well, we want to get him in a couple of weeks before the season, get him in football shape.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm sure both these guys are Bosa is going to be in phenomenal shape. He's like 8% body fat or whatever. But, you know, football shape is different. You don't want to throw him on the field all of a sudden week 1 and then he has a hamstring, then he's out for 4 weeks anyway. So that's important. But I think losing game checks, these are both players that are currently under pretty hefty contracts. So I get the whole week 8 accrue a season thing, but that means you're missing 8 game checks. And these are significant game checks for these two guys. Unlike someone like Jonathan Taylor, who's got his rookie contract money. Bosa's on his rookie contract.
Jacobs even, or
But Bosa's got number 2
overall pick
contract money, which is, you know, tens of millions of dollars. It's not a little contract we're talking about here. So I don't think either Jones or Bosa would want to miss those game checks. So I think the deals will get done before the season, but you want them to be in game shape. So to me, I've always said, and I keep getting asked this, and I've never really brought it up on this show, and I really rarely talk about Bosa on Locked On 49ers either, because it's like, look, maybe Labor Day we'll start talking about it, because now if it gets done, and it's fine. And I think the Jones camp, if they're leaking that's like them really, you know, saying, okay, we might have a gap here in what our negotiations are. And that's a great thing to sort of posture about. But will these guys be willing to lose game checks? I have my doubts.
I do too, because we just never see it. Yeah, I mean, history shows everyone comes in and you get the paychecks, and they're so important to their team. These teams are contenders. And the other thing, I agree with everything you said. The only thing I wanted to add is, unlike some positions, even if you have a wrinkle here and there, defensive linemen are going to fit right back in. You know, it's not like, oh, we added a new stunt, we added a new blitz. Okay, I can figure that out in one day. You know, I mean,
and like Nick Bosa, he's never really had a real camp anyway, so that's never been a problem for him. You know, a ramp up period, yes, get ready for the season, but you know, you don't want your best player on a pitch count to start the year and, you know, maybe drop a game.
I do.
Well, yeah, exactly. And this is interesting. So I think this is probably the sticking point in both of these contracts, because Aaron Donald is the outlier contract wise, and he's the highest paid defensive tackle in the NFL, $31.6 million. So Chris Jones camp probably wants to go there, but the next highest paid defensive tackle is $24 million. That's a huge gap, right?
That's stickier than the Bosa situation then.
Right. So the Bosa situation, he's talking about TJ Watt, who's at 28, and Aaron Donald is at 31. So does you know, the Niners are probably saying, okay, here's 29, and Bosa's like, well, I want 32, and then they'll come in at 30.5 or 31.5, or maybe he'll end up getting, you know, a bigger total deal, but not annual as much as Aaron Donald, or, you know, something like that. But that's probably the TJ Watt versus Donald contract is where Bosa and the 49ers are. But with Chris Jones, they could be $8 million off.
That's a great point. I didn't think of it that way. And that's 100% it. Because if I'm Jones's agent, I'm starting with Donald money. I mean, like, hey, I had just as good as year. I'm just as valuable. We're winning Super Bowls just like Aaron did. And then the ownership comes back and says, but he's the best defense player that ever lived, and that's an outlier. So let's go halfway in between. And then you probably end up being like 3/4 of the way there, closer to Donald. I don't know, but that is a lot of a gap.
And at least Bosa has a better negotiating stand with his Defensive Player of the Year award, fresh off of last season, and being closer to that number already that you have to pay. So maybe that's why the Jones one might be a little bit more difficult to get done than the Bosa deal.
No one ever, I'm not even sure if I'm right about this, but Chris Jones might have came in second in that voting. He wasn't far off, that's for sure.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
And he's got a longer track record than Bosa. He's been around a little longer too.
True. I mean, I trust both of them to be great forever. But
I do too. Yep. Yeah. Injury is the only thing that slows either one of those dudes down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we got some more notes, some injury notes, good and bad. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, McLaurin, Miles Sanders, and an interesting one from The Athletic and our buddy over there, Mike Sando, quarterback strength of schedule this season in the NFL. Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Bird Dogs. I love wearing my Bird Dogs. In fact, I'm wearing them right now. I can't stand up and show you, but nice. I always talk about going golfing in my Bird Dogs. And my son is 5 years old. He loves nothing. He asks me every day, he's like, Dad, can we go golf today? And I'm like, yes, we can. We can fit in. Like, what a thing for your son to want to do with you, so it's awesome. And my Bird Dogs are perfect for it. And Bird Dogs make you look good, but they also make you feel good because of that Bird Dog stretch khaki shorts that are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you that truly sculpted look, but they fit way better than the regular shorts that are made of stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fixed all those issues by inventing their own cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches. So you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice any movement, no matter what you're doing, work or play. And they use anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long, no matter what it is you're doing. And you can get yourself a pair. All you got to do is go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL or enter promo code LockedOnNFL for a free white tech hat with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNFL or promo code LockedOnNFL for a free white tech hat. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Okay, so we've got some not great news with Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and we've seen this in the past, Matt. And one of the things that can derail a rookie start to a rookie career for a player is injuries early on, and especially if you miss a lot of time and you miss a lot of camp and you just don't get those reps, and then you come into year two and you're way behind. We've seen this. It's not quite the same type of injury, but we've seen this with John Mechie now, and it feels like he's further behind than someone like Tank Dell is, even who's a current rookie, because of the time off. Much different situation for John Mechie, and hope for the best for him, and as he gets going now, finally with his NFL career. But Jaxon
Jameson Williams, Jameson Williams has a weird career, right?
His career started, and that's not good. That's the way careers go bad south. And you look at NFL drafts in the past, you're like, how were half of these first round picks quote unquote busts or whatever? And you look at it and like, well, injury here, didn't care about football, didn't work, injury here, right? So Jaxon
real quick, I want to stop you real quick, because just being around a team like I am with the Steelers and being up at camp, when these things happen at camp, they are so patient and just take a day off and you'll be fine. And during the preseason, but once you get on a moving train in week one, all you care about is that opponent. We got practice schedules to go boom, 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 boom. Sure, you'll spend all the time with the trainer, but you're either with us or not. Teams, it's a totally different mindset once it's time to gear up for week one.
In fact, I was a little bit worried about the career if it would ever get off the ground for your guy Calvin Austin, because they put him on IR like an injury that needed to be a season-long injury, but they're like, sorry, dude. And it was like, they must not have liked what they saw either, so maybe we never see that guy, but he's making good in year two. Which is a good sign. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, that's all to say. Luckily, it doesn't look like it's a huge injury, and he's had an opportunity to go through camp, has the injury in preseason week number 2, but it might keep him out to start the season, is what we're hearing, right?
Yeah, it sounds like the news is very unlikely for week one. And when we hear those things, usually it ends up being week 3 or 4 till he's running a route all the time. You know what I mean? Like
And
the
then you need
easy
to
in
put him
week
on
2. And yeah.
you put him on IR to return because you need the roster spot. And does that go from week 1 to week 4, week 8, or whatever it is? So
hopefully not. But
right.
Yeah. But I'm no doctor, but everyone just says, oh, he broke a bone in his wrist. But I guess the one that he broke doesn't heal as fast as others or whatever, or is prohibitive to catching the foot. Whatever it is, the bone that he broke is the wrong one you want to break.
Yeah. It's the bone that helps you put up the middle finger to your fantasy people that drafted you.
That's important, right?
Terry McLaurin and Miles Sanders, though, good news there. Looks like they are going to be ready for the regular season.
That's a rumor. Yeah, I mean, watching that Commanders game, I was like, oh no, McLaurin's out for the year. He's throwing stuff, but it sounds like there's a very good chance he's back. Miles Sanders is back. I think Kenneth Walker's fully back. So obviously these things have fantasy implications, but I think we're in good shape and out of the woods on most of those guys.
Looking at quarterback strength of schedule, Matt, and shout out to Mike Sandoz, helped us out quite often in the offseason in the NFL with some of the articles. And I just love hearing insights from people in the league and how they value things. And if you're not familiar with Mike Sandoz's work, you probably don't listen to our podcast. And he always does the QB tiers list every offseason. And it's based on how coaches and executives and scouts rank these quarterbacks around the NFL. He cross-referenced that with schedules now. And here is the quarterback strength of schedule for all 32 teams in the NFL. We're not going to go through all 32. We'll go through the top and the bottom, but some interesting results and some tough schedules based on the quarterbacks you're playing, which ties in pretty strongly with just regular strength of schedule.
Of course. I mean, obviously playing tough quarterbacks also makes it a difficult strength of schedule. And I am very much a strength of schedule believer, not based off last year's win totals, but based off of Vegas odds, which Warren Sharp does. But this correlates hand in hand with that. Obviously, teams with really good quarterbacks, tier 1 quarterbacks, etc., also have high win totals. But I think it's a really interesting side piece that Sando does because his quarterback tiers is widely popular. He does it every year. It's been 2 years in a row. And then he started putting this formula together of, like, for example, Miami plays the hardest stretch. And again, you have 17 games. On average, they play a 2.24 quarterback. Like tier 1's a 1, tier 4's a 4. Now that doesn't sound too awful. You'd think, oh, that's like league average. I mean, right? Like that's a B-, but it isn't, because just to give you a demonstration, this is who Miami plays. They play from hardest to easiest. Mahomes, Allen twice, Rodgers twice, Herbert, Hurts, Lamar, Dak. I mean, like, those are all the tier 1 and tier 2 guys they play against. That's awful.
That's over half your schedule right there. And those are high tier 2 or tier 1 quarterbacks, or maybe a tier 2 quarterback that plays like a tier 1, which any of those guys could. Sure. So that's a rough go. And look, there's a correlation with all the teams in the AFC West and AFC East that have tough schedules because they're playing all the other good teams. And those are the 2 strongest divisions in the NFL when you're playing each other. But then even the out of division games like hurts that the Miami Dolphins have. And then, is there a resurgence from Russell Wilson this year, right? He's one of the tier 3 quarterbacks that you're going against. What is it going to look like with Daniel Jones in New York and Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee? So, when I looked at this and I saw it made total sense that the Miami Dolphins had the most difficult schedule versus quarterbacks, but then it ties into what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. Maybe the way to defeat that is keep them off the field. How do you do that? Strong running game, bring in Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, okay. There you have it. It's not bad at all. And I want to mention this too, because Sando takes us even a step further and ranks all these teams 1 to 32 in terms of your division games. Like, for example, Miami has the 5th hardest division game quarterback opponent schedule, but they're number 1 hardest in interconference. And what that means is the AFC games outside the division, which often determine if wildcard teams go or not. I mean, they play Mahomes, Herbert, Wilson, Garoppolo. So, obviously it's important to win your division games first and foremost, but if you're getting hammered in your conference games, chances are you're not going to end up in the wild card.
The New England Patriots come in number 2 in the same division and very similar looking schedule and have all the same quarterbacks we just listed there. Mahomes, Allen twice, Rodgers twice, Herbert, Hurts, Dak, all on their schedule. Derek Carr's in there for the Patriots that weren't in there for the Miami Dolphins. And the difference between, and like the Bills and the New York Jets have difficult schedules as well, but it's easier to play, based on quarterback tiers. It's easier to play against Mac Jones and Tua than it is to play against Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers, according to those tiers. So that's why the Miami Dolphins and New England Patriots have the most difficult schedules.
Yes, absolutely. And if you look at strength of schedule, that Sharp does, they're also the toughest. I mean, like Miami's 30th and the Patriots are 32nd. I mean, they come in last in that equation. Right. And just a couple little things, just comparing the Jets and Patriots. I mean, the Jets have to play Lamar, where the Patriots get Pickett. So, I mean, there's a couple single games out there that are the difference.
Interesting that the Kansas City Chiefs come in number 3 here because they don't have to play Patrick Mahomes once or twice because they have Patrick Mahomes on their team. But who they do have to play is the Cincinnati Bengals and Joe Burrow, and they do have to play the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen, and they do have to play the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers and Justin Herbert twice. And they've got Jalen Hurts, right? They're playing the first place schedule here with the divisions they're playing against. Trevor Lawrence is on their schedule, Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff. So an interesting one there for the Kansas City Chiefs that don't have the easiest schedule either as far as opposing quarterbacks, even though they got the best quarterback in the league.
And looking at this, what's also interesting about theirs is they only get one tier 4 guy. So there's none that are just layups, but of course they have the quarterback advantage in all these games, but they only play one tier 4 quarterback. And that tier is Jordan Love, who absolutely could be a 3. I mean,
or
tier
a 2.
4 or 2 even, right? I mean, the 4 is where Sando has them stick unknowns. So Love, guys like that, Purdy, Pickett, they absolutely could outplay a tier 4. So it looks like they don't have any layups, any bad quarterbacks. Colt McCoy's not on there.
Next, some of the top quarterback schedules, and then some of the easiest schedules versus opposing quarterbacks in the NFL next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business and high stress at times as well. When you're doing that hiring, you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. All you do is you add your job to the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile, and it spreads the word that you are hiring. And you've got a wide net potentially of hirees because, look, everyone's on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. You're on LinkedIn. Those job seekers are on LinkedIn. And then there's simple tools to whittle that down and filter to just the right people with screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, rounding out the most difficult quarterback strength of schedules in the NFL in 2023. No surprise that there's more AFC East and AFC West teams on the list. 1 was Dolphins, 2 Patriots, 3 Kansas City Chiefs, 4 is the Buffalo Bills, and 5 is those Los Angeles Chargers. And then you have the Las Vegas Raiders coming in at number 6 with the Denver Broncos, New York Jets, and rounding out basically the entirety of the East and West there through the top 8 most difficult.
So I have 2 notes here I want to mention is, as you said, the Chiefs are 3, the Bills are 4, the Chargers are 5, and I think Cincinnati isn't far behind. They're 10. Well, that's like the 4 best quarterbacks in the league. So that means us as viewers are going to see the Chiefs, Bills, Bengals, Chargers play against awesome quarterback battles. You know what I mean? That means we're going to get a lot of
prime time football games, right?
Exactly. That's going to be fun as can be. I hadn't thought of that, And then the other nugget I have here is the Raiders. The Raiders come in at 6, but they have the hardest division opponents, which shouldn't shock you. Mahomes twice, Herbert twice, Wilson twice, who they count as a tier 3 team, but they also get Allen. They also get Rodgers.
Yeah. And so that's very difficult. And so that's where it comes into play, where it's like, okay,
makes you want to bet the under on the Raiders.
Tier 3 quarterback, you might be okay with Garoppolo, but all of a sudden you look at the schedule, it's like, man, even if I have the exact middle, I have the 16th best quarterback in the NFL, more than half of the games, I'm going to have a better quarterback and a star quarterback in a lot of these games. So that's really tough for a team that might have less talent like the Raiders. And you could see how the Raiders might have a really rough season this year and be drafting pretty high again.
Yeah, like you look at the Bills, you look at the Chiefs and be like, okay, they have a brutal schedule of quarterbacks, but their guys still might be better. You know, where the Raiders, it's not, you know.
So let's go down to the bottom of the list here, Matt, because that's
the bottom two are crazy.
So the easiest schedule as far as quarterbacks goes is the New Orleans Saints, and that's just because of how much turnover and what's going on in their division at quarterback, and the young quarterbacks in their division, and then they have the veteran guy in their division that you expect to be the best quarterback in that division in Derek Carr. So the Saints have the easiest strength of schedule versus quarterbacks.
Yes, they don't play a tier 1 guy. Frankly, I think the only scary guy they play is Trevor Lawrence, who could be a tier 1 guy. They only played 3 tier 2s. Stafford and Cousins, will they be truly tier 2 guys this year? Maybe, but I doubt they're going to be Mahomes.
Easier to game plan against just because you know who their primary weapon is, and
they're old.
Shut that down, and you know how else are they going to beat you, especially with the Rams roster right now with how bad the rest of it looks outside of Stafford to Cup on offense.
Yeah. And again, I mean, the Falcons aren't much different. They come in at 32, but this is who they play. The Saints. And frankly, this is a huge reason I'm going to probably pick the Falcons and Saints to end up in the playoffs. I don't know who had to win the division, but the Saints have Lawrence, Stafford, Cousins, Goff, Daniel Jones, Fields, Tannehill, Mac Jones, Love, Mayfield twice, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Richardson. They play all 3 of the top 5 again. Bryce Young quite again, and Ritter twice. Like, that's awesome.
And there is some high variance though, because Fields, what tier is he in? You know, is he awful or is he amazing? There's almost not going to be a middle ground with Fields, I feel like, this year. So I don't think you can't count on a tier 3 from Fields. You're going to get tier 4 or you're going to get tier 2. You know what I mean? Somewhat similar, not quite to that degree with Daniel Jones potentially. Goff, I think tier 3 doesn't tell you about their offense though, and Goff could be that tier 2 quarterback. I think he's really close with Kirk Cousins anyway on those tiers lists. And if I'm not mistaken, Cousins was the final tier 2 quarterback, right?
Yeah,
Goff was the top of the tier 3, if I'm not mistaken. And then, you know, maybe one of the rookie quarterbacks ends up being really good by the time you play Anthony Richardson in week 8. Is he a problem for you? Maybe. You know, Desmond Ritter twice. Maybe that's not the tier 4 layup that it looks like on paper right now, because you just don't know what that's going to be. So it could be much more difficult than it's laid out here, but versus like if you're drawing a card, you're like, yes, give me this schedule.
Exactly. And actually some of the guys ranked the highest, with the exception of Fields and Lawrence. I think you basically know who they are. Stafford, Cousins, Tannehill. You know what I mean? Like Goff. Like, I don't think any of those guys is jumping up to tier 1 and by week 12 or whatever.
And even if Bryce Young hits, you're probably not super scared about that offense right now at this point in the development and what's going on in offense with all the talent around Bryce Young either.
And that could be true for all the highly drafted rookies, because
Jonathan Taylor might not be in Indianapolis with Anthony Richardson either. So probably no surprise that the rest of the South is the bottom 4. So the next easiest schedule is the Falcons, then it's the Panthers, then it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Because they all play each other. There's terrible quarterbacks in there.
Yeah, but they each get to play, you know, some of the weakest quarterbacks twice per year there.
Atlanta happens to have Aaron Rodgers on the schedule. That's why they're not last.
How about this, though? The Los Angeles Rams come in at 28 and the Chicago Bears come in at 27. So this kind of goes to that, you know, okay, Chicago Bears might be that team. And I've been on the Bears bandwagon. I believe in Fields. I love the weapons that they've added. I'm not sure they have enough on defense, but with this schedule, with some unknowns in the division, I mean, I don't want to put worst to first on them, but I think it's the team with odds that you could get behind.
Right. I mean, like looking from the bottom up, they get McCoy, Ritter, Howe, Young, Love, Mayfield, Love again. It's not so bad. Jimmy, Russell Wilson could be a tier 4 guy by then. Goff twice, Derek Carr.
And even if
Fields might be better than all those guys.
And it's like, okay, so the Bears lose to Mahomes and Herbert and Deshaun Watson even. And
he might not be good.
And split with Cousins. Okay, cool. But 4 losses.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's an advantage in all the other games. No, that's a good point. And the Rams are interesting to me too. Not necessarily who they play, but their over-under total so low. I could see their season, if they stay healthy, far surpassing that. But if they lose Kupp, Stafford, Donald, any of them, I don't care who they're playing against the quarterback.
Anything else jump out to you in the quarterback tier's strength of schedule?
A little bit, just because the Jags are a good team with an easy schedule, as you'd imagine in that division, because clearly they have the best. I'm just kind of scanning here. Are there any other good teams that have an easy schedule? Seattle's a 22. I mean, that's not too bad. They only have one tier 1 guy on the schedule, and that's Burrow. But they do have to play Hurts, Jackson, Dak, Stafford twice, and Watson. So I might be a little more bullish on Seattle after looking at this.
I do not have the FanDuel over-unders in front of me right now, but I'm guessing based on what we've talked about today, Matt, you probably feel good about smashing the over on teams like Jacksonville and New Orleans.
New Orleans and Atlanta, I feel really strong about the overs. The thing about Jacksonville is there's this Football Outsiders plexiglass principle. Like when teams take a huge step forward, they usually take a little bit of a step back. But I think their huge step forward is more because of who the coach was 2 years ago, as opposed to, abnormal progression. You know what I mean?
And if you took that plexiglass principle and applied it only to teams that jumped into the potential tier 1 quarterback area, it probably doesn't regress as much.
Interesting. So one more note that you might find interesting is I'm scrolling to find the Niners. They're right in the middle. They're at 17. But they might be the biggest discrepancy in terms of strength of schedule from Sharp, because from that metric, based on Vegas forecasted wins, they're the 5th easiest. But according to Sando, they're right in the middle. And I think the Rams have a lot to do with that, because Stafford's a tier 2 quarterback, but their projected win total is very low.
Yes. Yeah. That makes total sense there. And, they only play one tier 1 quarterback. That's Joe Burrow and the Bengals in week 8. They do have some difficult teams and some good teams and a whole bunch of tier 2 quarterbacks, but they don't dip into tier 1 very much there. And I think that's a great point about Stafford because, better quarterback than team there in Los Angeles.
Yeah. And I do this with the Steelers. You probably do it with the Niners, but it's also interesting to check, like one of the toughest Steeler non-AFC North one in the AFC is Lawrence, but you have it home. You know what I mean? And I think there's a week rest or something so when do you get these guys too is sort of important.
Fantastic stuff. Big shout out as always to Mike Sando of The Athletic. Read all of his work because it's always fantastic. And we appreciate the nuggets he gives us to talk about here on Peacock and Williamson. Tomorrow is mailbag time already this week. Getting ready for preseason week number 3 at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL on Twitter, or drop a comment and question on YouTube. And make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Hit the notifications so you know when a new show goes up. The thumbs up. Appreciate you. And of course, you can find us everywhere you listen to your podcast. Matt and I back tomorrow. Peacock and Williamson.